Hello all, it's Wednesday. There's almost nothing sensible to say about what's happening in the world, or certainly this country. But we're going to give it a go in the next hour. We're going to actually try and do two things, if we might. We're going to try and devote the bulk of the conversation to trying to understand what's happened to standards in British public and political life. Please weigh in with views. We're doing this, I suppose, with a couple of strands in mind. One is, what do we commission? Matt D'Ancona, Kerry, and a bunch of us this morning were trying to think about what's the best narrative thread through Partygate. So if you think about the, long form audio essays that Matt's done, Sick Man, Retreat from Kabul, who or where is the kind of best narrative to understand what's happened in number 10 and number 11. So we're thinking about that. And the second thing is, as it relates to all of this, I think I mentioned a few weeks ago, we're working on a survey of public opinion around democracy in Britain, partly with a look to what the rules and the unwritten constitution means for this country, but partly also looking in a way that's kind of a little less grand and more direct at, do the courts work? Do the police work? Do we have a set of standards and an accountability around things like health and education? So that kind of, does democracy work in Britain? There are sort of two lenses for this. But I hope that we can, in the course of the coming hour, talk through Johnson and Sunak. It would be really interesting to try and pick up a little bit of the kind of standards debate around Geit himself. I would also like to see if we can talk about what's happened in Wakefield and Imran Khan MP. And if you've listened to Paul Caruana Galicia's follow-up on Lebedev, the look at Greg Barker, it feels as though there are issues there about standards and power and public life too. So that's the theme. Before we leave, and remind me if I forget, it wouldn't be the first time, I want to just let you know we're planning for our think-ins, difficult conversations, important ones in May and June. And I just wanted to run you through what we're doing. And if people have views, things they like, love, hate, you can let me know. Lara Spirit, are you there, Lara? Can I start with you?
Hello, yes.
Hey, Lara.
Hi.
So do you want to do a quick rundown? Why don't we, instead of starting with the Prime Minister, why don't we start with the Chancellor?
Okay.
So because every day in the last week, the Chancellor seems to, like the rest of the country, be wondering whether he should be Chancellor.
Yeah.
Do you know what his latest view is on being Chancellor?
His latest view is that he's going to stay, although it was quite touch and go yesterday. Obviously, everybody on this call will probably know that yesterday it was announced that both he and the Prime Minister were to be fined for the Prime Minister's so-called birthday party in June 2020. And they had a call, Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak, where they agreed that they would both issue a joint statement saying they'd had this and apologise. And Boris Johnson then came out and gave his statement, and there was 7 hours of silence from Rishi Sunak. The reporting that's happened since has said that he very, very seriously considered his position and came very close to resigning in those moments. So the current kind of conclusion is that he's going to stay, although, like you said, the last few weeks have been extremely bleak for him. You went from revelations around his non-dom status to his green card to his wife's tax affairs, and I don't think that any of his advisors have really held back in talking to journalists about how personally difficult it's been for him and for his family. His family having over the weekend moved out of Downing Street and back into West London. So it's clear that the Chancellor himself is having a personally very difficult time. And yesterday probably came as close to resigning as he ever did. The question obviously now is, will he stay? I think, to be honest, I think he probably missed a bit of an opportunity yesterday with resigning. He certainly would have made Boris Johnson's position extremely difficult yesterday had he. But now that he's not resigned, I think it's very likely that after the May elections, even if they go fairly well, that in the next reshuffle, he'll be moved. I don't see how you can have Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak both being fined and staying in those positions at the very top of government.
Can I just check one thing, which I didn't know, is so in the call between Johnson and Sunak, the understanding is that they would they would issue a joint statement, you said, or that they would
So
go coordinated statements?
So the statement that went to journalists yesterday said both the Prime Minister and the Chancellor have been issued with a fine. So journalists got that statement saying that both of those individuals together had been issued those fines, and all the necessary things about them respecting the decisions of the Metropolitan Police, etc. So that was the statement. And then you'll remember that Boris Johnson from Chequers gave that address where he said he was sorry, and he focused specifically, and I think not particularly strategically wisely, on that party itself, and on this idea that he had seen those colleagues earlier, that he wasn't there for very long at all, that he wasn't really aware, the idea for me, given that I think there are going to be more fines for Boris Johnson and possibly even Rishi Sunak, but the idea that he's focused specifically on that party, I don't think is a particularly strategic decision from Boris Johnson's team. But that statement came out, and all that while, Rishi Sunak, the number 10 team, had been expecting Rishi Sunak to do something similar, and it took a full 7 hours for Rishi Sunak to say the same. And he said that the reports are that he'd had very soul-searching conversations with close aides and family members about his position going forward. And I mean, it is a very, very difficult decision to make, I think, because I couldn't really see a way. I don't know what you think, James, but I couldn't really see a way out for Rishi Sunak yesterday.
Well, I think that like I go back to my old rule of what's the difference between a problem, a crisis, and a scandal. And a problem is something that's gone wrong that goes somewhere. A crisis is a problem where it goes several places, and a scandal goes everywhere. This one sits between a crisis and a scandal, because it feels to me you do have some unresolved issues around the non-dom status, because it must be the case that, well, not must be, but it's very likely the case that Akshati Murthy's kind of international tax treatment is going to be subject to examination, given that the Conservative government's argument in favour of non-dom tax rules, among other things, is that they're going hard out over tax avoidance and tax havens internationally. If it turns out that money has moved through tax havens, that has enabled her and his family, that feels like it's another shoe to drop. Then you've got the curious question of the Sunak political team, i.e. what prompted the Sun interview on the Thursday, the full 180 degrees on the Friday, the move out of the Downing Street flat on the Saturday, the Sunday story that I'm sticking around. So I think there's the kind of political, then there's the green card, and there's a curious question here about what that means, and but I think this is the most difficult one of all, because he's essentially being co-opted to be flak for the Prime Minister, isn't he?
Yeah.
All the statements. So the extent to which that also creates something that's different from all of this, which is more important in some ways than all of this, which is an entirely toxic relationship between the Prime Minister and the Chancellor. Yeah. Because the one thing that he really can't do, which is a statement that says, I was going for a meeting and then Carrie bought a cake, and as a result of which, I've now deemed to have broken the law.
Yeah.
That, I'm sure, is the statement he wanted to print but couldn't.
Yeah. And there was a sense in which the decision yesterday was a pretty unfair one, right? There was a sense in which Rishi Sunak really had just walked into the room and feels like he's being very unfairly treated. And they were clearly desperate to put that out. I think it raises considerable questions as well about the way that the Met have handled this investigations, because a number of journalists are quite frustrated that we've had no information about how they're doing these fines, about what the rationale is, about when they're going to be telling people. And I think it suggests that the bar is really quite low, right, for these fines, in that if and also that Simon Case, the cabinet secretary, hasn't been fined for that event, which people are finding pretty inexplicable.
He was in the cabinet. He was in the cabinet room when the cake came in.
Yes. Yeah.
The thing that is very, very difficult, which I do still think is very difficult, is how do you describe, how do you explain there were no parties? I didn't knowingly go. I mean, the statement of Parliament. But actually, Laura, can I just bring in William a second, because we discussed the point that William Jeremy has made here, which is, who do we think leaked the non-dom? So, William, I don't know whether you've got a theory of the case on that.
Not an advanced theory, but maybe, I mean, it's been suggested that someone in inverted commas Labour supporting, but that did come from the Daily Mail, which of course, because I've been in Yorkshire for the last couple of weeks, I have been catching up with the Daily Mail because my father-in-law gets it. So I'm of the Harold Macmillan opinion about the Daily Telegraph, which is I don't need to read the Daily Mail because I know what's in it. But so there was a sort of kind of suggestion that this deep throat civil servant, perhaps from the Treasury team, was putting information out there. And of course, the Chancellor felt that, you know, he was the victim of a hit job.
Yeah. There's something, William, there is something, I mean, it is interesting because, you know, the short time I ever spent doing the lobby, I was there and it was very, very early Brown Blair days, you know, and then at the Times during the kind of real TBGBs, the hostility was really profound, but it was also overwhelmingly ideological, right? It wasn't tactical or political or personal. And that's the reason why I think Laura's right, is that come a reshuffle, it's pretty untenable to have a chancellor who feels stitched up by the prime minister. And that's, I think personally is going to be very hard. Just to your point about who leaked it, I did ask Matt, who can't join us sadly this evening, because there was an interesting line in the papers on Sunday that made a point of referring to the number 10 ethics officer, I think Helen McNamara is her name, who had essentially been briefed by Rishi Sunak when he took on the job initially at the Treasury about the tax status of his wife's affairs. And I was quite struck then by the naming of her. But I think that, you know, Matt's point, just to kind of relay it, Matt's point, which makes good sense to me, is just go back to the picture on the Downing Street garden terrace of the party that came from number 11. You know, these hostilities go really, really deep now. And so it's really hard to tell. And it's also worth pointing out that, you know, there are 100 odd people involved. That's a hard group of people to corral. Laura, can I just come to you back to you for a second before we sort of kind of leave Sunak altogether? You know, my beef with Sunak, as you know, because I keep on banging on about it, is it's not about kind of short-term politics or tax affairs. I thought that they were going to have to clear up his wife's non-dom status, and they did. It's the fact that I think he's made a set of lousy, timid, treasury-captured decisions around debt, tax, and investment in Britain's future. And I suppose the thing that I find depressing is the thought that actually a more wounded chancellor is, if anything, going to be more treasury captured and less likely to be confident. But am I wrong in that? Is there well, screw it, you know, I might as well.
I mean, he's not ideologically where you are anyway, I suppose. And so if he is more wounded, and as a result it's more necessary that he toes the line with Boris Johnson's fiscal agenda, there's probably still a bit of a gap between your fiscal agenda, James, and Boris Johnson's anyway. So I can't imagine. I think probably what you might see is him being less firm on the constraints he has around when he allots certain funding. I'm sure that were Boris to insist on certain packages for different parts of his levelling up agenda, for example, on the condition that Rishi kept his job and he was desperate to do so, that might kind of lead to it. But I actually think probably what you're more likely to see is a kind of Sajid Javid, where Rishi Sunak is like, actually, I find that quite insulting, and I'd rather not be in this job than I would be in this job and take concessions. However, I think I was thinking about this today, and the comparisons with Sajid Javid, who obviously used to be Rishi Sunak's boss in the Treasury. And I can't see Rishi Sunak as a sort of contented backbencher. I don't know what you think, but I mean, as we've seen in the last few weeks, he's bad at politics, and he's bad at manoeuvring, and he's not a sort of Gavin Williamson figure who is quite capable of speaking to many different people in the party and drawing up a coalition of people. I mean, when it was an open goal, he couldn't even seem to openly coordinate with MPs who were very receptive to him as a possible future leader. So I can't really see this, the kind of everybody saying he wants to go to California, etc. He's got many other options. I can't really imagine him happily taking a seat on the backbenches after this. So that's why I think yesterday when I was mulling this over, I think his options just seem like so limited, which is unbelievable when you think about the fact that just a few weeks ago we were talking about him as the kind of heir apparent to number 10. It's astonishing.
One thing I would say is I did think that from the kind of it's interesting when you're trying to look under the hood of like spin and public statements. I did think that as bad as the Sun interview was with Sunak, I did think that her statement, which I can't remember when it landed on the Friday, was like perfectly fresh. It kind of, you may disagree with the position that she held in terms of non-bomb, etc. But the trying to navigate a line, which is, I love my dad and the business he built. I care deeply about India. I'm proud of Britain. I thought she managed to navigate that. That was very well crafted. I saw that Sarah Sands, the old Evening Standard editor,
it's her,
advisor, I thought was very impressive. All right, let's just do before because we've got another statement to consider later on when we talk to Paul about Greg Barker. But for a moment, let's just go to number 10, Lara. Will you just do everyone a sort of 2-minute sketch on David Canzini? Because I should just say to everyone listening, Lara has this brilliant way now of coming into our news meeting and say, well, of course, the really interesting person is David Canzini. And because we're all trying to pretend that we know what's going on, we nod. So if you're listening, just nod along. And in about 90 seconds, you'll be like, aha, yeah, the person to think about is David Canzini.
Well, people here might have had, David Canzini is my latest fascination. He's the new Deputy Chief of Staff in Downing Street, and he was originally offered the job when Boris Johnson entered number 10, but he turned it down. And he's now been brought in as part of this kind of new number 10 shake-up, which will buy back disgruntled backbenchers who were upset about Partygate and considering sending in letters to Sir Graham Brady calling for Boris Johnson's resignation. So he's very popular with the backbenchers because he is seen as a sort of lifer in election strategy within the Conservative Party. He started his career in the 1980s for Edwina Currie as an election aide. He ran one of Michael Portillo's by-election campaigns. He ran David Davis's leadership campaign, and he was very influential in the 2015 election too, and is the sort of best friend of Linton Crosby and has been involved in Linton Crosby's lobbying firm for a number of years. He's also quite an eccentric character, and he is a real ideological believer in a so-called clean Brexit. He is very pro-Brexit, and he is known for being extremely tribal and extremely committed to the party. And he's doing a number of lobby journalists who are well connected within number 10 at least a bit of a favor, because he's sort of added a number of little colorful snippets into their various different write-ups of number 10 recently. So he's known for being fervently of the belief that everyone who works in number 10 should be a member of the Conservative Party. And you'll remember that not his predecessor, but his sort of predecessor, above one, Dominic Cummings, obviously wasn't a member of the Conservative Party, but David Canzini has said to all aides, I want you all to be members of the Conservative Party. I've printed off forms and I'm going to check in a couple of weeks whether or not you are. He's very much of the mind that number 10 as a sort of place and a character now is an election hub. He's told people there to prepare for an election in autumn 2023. So he really believes that the operation in Downing Street should be about an election. And as such, above the cost of living crisis or above the NHS backlog, he thinks that delivering Brexit should be the number one priority for this government. And that, to me, I think conveys the sense of the next election being the core consideration of the Johnson administration right now. So he's been seen.
Sorry, Laura, can I ask you something? Is that... So I was interested, you remember when Partygate really broke for them, the swing at the BBC, the promise to do something around asylum seekers in the Channel.
Yeah.
How good is the polling operation, and who in effect does it for Downing Street? Because that Canzini bet, I imagine it's a part gut, right? But it must also be rooted in some polling that says, for our, whether it's red wall seats or for core Tory voters, Brexit delivery is still a primary measure of this government.
Yeah, So I've been thinking about this because they have internal pollers at number 10, right? But the people doing those polls will be using all the same measures as the polls. I was speaking to a friend who's a special advisor the other day, that they will be using the same polling agencies and the same polling techniques often as we will see in the public. So what you're seeing in public polls, when you look at the polls and what public think as the important issues, they're not going to be radically different to what the private polling that's done for the Conservative Party or that's done for Boris Johnson or David Canzini actually looks like. And I haven't seen a poll, especially not in the last month or since February 24th, for example, which would put delivering on a so-called clean Brexit anywhere near the top of the agenda. So I think that to me shows that there's a sort of like a sort of personal hunch that David Canzini has around this idea that that coalition, especially that Red Wall coalition, electorally can be served well by retaining some aspects of the 2019 Brexit campaign, which of course was seen as a real feat for them.
For what it's worth, Laura, I mean, one thing I think is worth looking into is I hear quite a lot of people feeling that the Rishi problem and the Johnson problem are similar in one sense, which is they don't get the extent of the cost of living crisis.
Yeah.
They do not understand that is actually going to be the defining issue for voters.
Yeah, and we had,
it's either Ukraine this or Brexit that.
Yeah, and I just sat on one of the focus groups that you mentioned, James, this democracy work that we've been,
what was it like?
Been doing. It was completely fascinating, and indeed the cost of living crisis obviously came up so much, and so much more than even today, a crucial day in Partygate, and I was sat there thinking, well, of course they're going to be talking about how Boris Johnson absolutely has to go. Of course they are, and the cost of living came up time and time again, and the sense of politicians collectively being to blame for that. So and people reeling off different prices for different goods, etc., and price of energy, but people are really across it and extremely concerned and worried about it. So I think you're completely right that that is going to be a huge issue, and I really don't see how either Boris Johnson or Rishi Sunak, if they don't get that in hand in the next few months, are going to be able to be successful in the next election, regardless of whether David Canzini is running their campaign or not.
Okay, Laura, listen, thanks. We could go on and on. In fact, we have gone on and on. So let me make sure we, because I've asked a few other people just to help us understand this sort of standards in public life question in the light of the last week we've had. Paul, I sort of, if you notice a sort of like nervous in my voice, I always wonder, what have we done now? If you haven't had a chance to listen to Paul's investigation into Greg Barker, he did a sort of long piece of reporting into 2019, and then this week, Greg Barker, the Lord's work, is a kind of extraordinary listen. I obviously I knew a little bit about it, but having listened to it, I had this amazing moment, sort of 24 hours late, where I suddenly got extremely wound up about the fact that everyone, pretty much every regulatory authority, had whistled through Oleg Deripaska's aluminium business and onto the London Stock Exchange long after there were questions about Oleg Deripaska, the origins of the company. But I wondered, Paul, whether or not you can just sort of help us get a sense of what's the Lebedev latest, right? i.e. kind of what's Parliament doing around Lebedev, and then if you wouldn't mind, what happens, or if any shoes are yet to drop on Barker.
Sure. So on Lebedev, the next big thing we're expecting would be the product of this humble address motion, it's called, that Parliament voted through, which in effect forces the Cabinet Office to release the advice they got from the security services in relation to Evgeny Lebedev's peerage. So that should be due towards the end of the month, although they can release it with redactions or, find various ways around it. The same kind of ways they got out of answering the FOI requests we submitted. But either way, it feels like a lot of pressure is building to have that advice released. And I think in one way or another, it will emerge.
And Paul, I want to understand something, because so I've obviously got a fantasy of a, manila folder with a magenta bow that you can
Yeah.
unlock, and then suddenly there are a bunch of grainy photographs. Something tells me you don't get that. You get do you just get a rather bland letter that's come from MI5,
Well, I
SIS?
get-
When,
so
what are we going to? What would it be?
well, I can tell you what we got as a result of the FOI we submitted to the House of Lords Commission, which will give you an idea perhaps of what to expect. So IFOI, the House of Lords Appointments Commission, so a cabinet office body that oversees the appointments to the Lords, for this vetting report on Lebedev. So what they returned, or what they released to me, was a little information about the nomination of Evgeny, and then where the vetting report is in this package is just completely blank. And they were able to do that under an exemption, a national security exemption in the FOI Act, which is very powerful for public authorities. It allows them to redact, huge parts of public documents. And in Labour's humble address motion, they've allowed for that. They wrote into it something like, where the release won't threaten the country's security, please show us what you were told. So there is a big risk there. They can rely on that concern. But
So Joe, by the way, just so I understand this correctly, I mean, Joe Heller would be having a field day, wouldn't he?
Yeah.
Essentially, they're saying he wasn't a national security risk, hence we allowed him to become a member of the House of Lords. But for reasons of national security, we've redacted the documentation that warned against him becoming a member of the House of Lords.
Yes, it
That's
sounds
right.
bizarre, but their argument would be that there is a security risk in even showing how these things work.
Oh, I see. So the national security risk could be procedural rather than personal.
Yes, that's right, which is something they've been relying on as well. But I'm sure they will try and do it, but I don't know. I don't think it should wash, because this is about an individual. There are really strong public interest concerns, and there could be redactions, that protect the process, but reveal to the public what they have a right to know, that what the concerns about him were. But, there is no national security risk in that case. In fact, probably the opposite. There's a big security risk in hiding, in hiding what
And Paul, can I just understand something? By the way, this comes with a confession, tell you what a useless reporter I am. I was at an event the other day and I saw Richard Chartres across the room, kind of surrounded by people, and I failed to barge in and said, can you explain what happened in there? Because he was on the House of Lords Commission, Appointments Commission, wasn't he?
That's right. So
anyway,
it's
so I failed you there. But I saw that Lord Bew, who is the senior here on that commission, has been. So what's he been summoned to, and what happens as a result of that?
He's been summoned to a parliamentary committee to talk about this whole story. Now, the thing is, they'll obviously ask him about it, but the House of Lords Appointments Commission makes very clear that to protect the integrity of the appointments process, they promise nominees total confidentiality, and there are good reasons for it. So, for example, they ask for people's for information on people's tax status and so on, which is important to them, and nominees are owed some confidentiality there. Now, I imagine, even in front of this committee, will rely on that, because he's already been asked to make clear what the issues are, and he said that he can't, by revealing what the advice they received was, they'll undermine the integrity of the appointments process, and people will be put off putting themselves putting themselves forward as nominees, which
Yeah.
I find completely. Well, I don't know. I mean, if someone wants to be in the Lords, they're not going to be put off by that.
No, what I love about that is because we've got so few. You'll appreciate we've got so few members of the House of Lords. We're wondering that it's understaffed. Just
Yes.
flip, Paul. Just flip for a second. The Barker investigation. I did mention, by the way, this is if you can only listen to one part of the Barker podcast. And this is not very generous to Paul, but he'll appreciate it too, is do listen to Greg Barker's statement, which is kind of an extraordinary insight into him, really. I don't know what
it is amazing. It is amazing. And I thought, when I read it, I thought, wow, I could have spent months reporting on him and not got the insight that the statement provides. It was really extraordinary. And then I found it really funny how our Tortoise's lawyer, Adam, said this statement is ridiculous. You know, there's only one sentence that you need to run.
Yeah.
And I thought, my God, this is exactly why we should run
the whole thing and hear as much as possible. For those of you who haven't listened to it, it's just a very interesting, in a sort of semi-serious way, to witness what happens to a person when they get really angry and defensive and won't engage in the substance of the conversation, to the extent that they then put out a statement that is about them and not about the issues, and prejudges the reporting, which I hope you'd agree really does examine the issues. One of which is, Paul, just to be clear, I guess there are two in particular that arise from the podcast. One of them being the nature of the conversations Lord Barker had with members of the serving government around the Barker plan, heavily redacted again, but it seems as though that is a reasonable subject for further parliamentary scrutiny if Parliament chooses. And the other is the questions around Lord Barker's ongoing relationship with the company since leaving as chairman, and his interests or potential interest in trying to carve out the international assets of the company.
Yes.
Are those, do you think, the sort of, if you like, being a bit like us, are those, if you like, the two lines that come out of the
I think those are exactly them. And I'm seeing in the chat, people are talking about the Nolan principles on standards in public life. So on Barker meeting government officials, while Barker himself was an active member of parliament and was chairing an oligarch's company, that specifically presents real issues, right? So in the podcast, we talk about this meeting, and we got minutes through an FOI request that cover that meeting, and they're really extraordinary to read. But even before you get into them, the battle we had to get hold of them, so an FOI request fought over a year through various internal reviews, a decision notice from the Information Commission, so that alone presents a real issue, because some of the principles, or two of the principles, are accountability and openness. Now, if Barker, as he says in his statement, is proud of what he achieved through the lobbying, then why was it so hard to get hold of those minutes? And why was he so secretive about it? You know, this meeting in particular. So part of the reason why the release was held up was because Barker and/or Alan Duncan, who was the Foreign Office Minister for Russia, the man who Barker met, one of them filed a privacy complaint about my freedom of information request. And that's just not, I think, an acceptable standard for members of parliament and the government official to behave. You know, that there's no openness, and because there's no openness, there can be no accountability. And those are two breaches, apparent breaches of the Nolan principles. And then when you look,
it would be just, I should just make a point, Paul. It would be really interesting to ask Alan Duncan, you kind of wish you could get him into a sort of private place and go, look, when it comes to the role that you played in the deal on the tank debt and the release of Nazanin Zaghari Ratcliffe, actually, you probably want the process in all of its ugliness and mess and compromise to be made public.
Yes.
But in this case, not, although I suspect that, we don't know exactly where those privacy claims have come from. May actually have been from Greg Barker too. So there is a question here about understanding the process of government. I just want to pick up on one thing that you said, Paul, which is that Mark McAvoy made this point about the Nolan principles, and in his message in the chat, he's saying, "Oh, the terms of reference on this review of the Nolan principles looks like it's changing." And Mark, I don't know whether you're there and able to comment on all this, because you're better informed than I am. So what's the terms of reference issue? Well, and I think you're muted. Maybe you're either you're muted by Zoom or by murky political forces. Hold on. Can I just ask George whether we can unmute Mark? There he is. Have you or is it you who's? Hold on, we can't seem
Hopefully.
Oh, there you got you. Okay. So tell us what's going on there? Oh no, you're muted again.
Try that. Is that better?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
No, just as the conversation was unwrapping there, I just noted that there's the Committee on Standards in Public Life, which is nominally the oversight body for enforcement of if enforcement is the right word of the Nolan standards, is conducting a review at the moment on leading in practice, and there are very brief terms of reference on its website, which will pop in, but it all seems to be geared towards people in positions of leadership in the public sector, senior civil servants. That's my reading of it anyway. Everybody bar politicians of any stripe. And you get the impression, Nolan standards come into sort of effect in 1995. You get the impression now that they've become a wee bit devalued in meaning, if they ever had any to begin with. I think when they originally came out, they had a bit of moment and consequence, but now they're a bit of a cliche, aren't they? And you have to wonder whether they're devoid of any meaning whatsoever. And is there time now is it now time rather to revisit them and look again at the standards themselves? I mean, memory. I was quite young at the time, but I think it followed the Scott inquiry, didn't it? Arms to Iraq and all of that.
Yeah.
I mean, and it feels like it happened in a different,
different world.
Different world. Yeah.
But do you think that there was? I remember once having a conversation about football and someone saying, the problem with football is they need bigger goals, and someone said, no, you don't really understand that the game has certain rules. Do you think that the part of the issue here is it doesn't really matter where you land the rules these days in terms of politics, because there's a kind of realpolitik, there's a kind of gravitational pull. If you can get away with it, you get away with it.
Yeah.
I thought Danny Finkelstein had a good point about the way Johnson thinks about these things, which is you have a thick skin and you just barrel on. Yeah. Does it make much difference whether you do revise the Nolan principles?
I mean, I personally, I don't think it does. I think there's a bigger issue at play, which is about our understanding of objective reality, epistemic truth, call it what you will. But I mean, we're into a situation now where people get, I think, the public at large get exhausted with I suppose like a fatigue about indignation, really. That's, I think, calculated. Back at the time, I think when these principles came out and in the years thereafter, I mean, a scandal was a scandal, just to go back to your earlier description. Now there seems to be a fresh scandal every week, to the point that I think the public at large are just exhausted with it all. A high-minded review into these kind of fairly woolly standards probably won't add a great deal to things.
And Mark, can I ask you one thing? Sorry, forgive me. This is like totally random. Are you in Belfast?
I am.
Yeah.
Well, I'm in. Well, I work in Belfast. I'm probably your furthest flung correspondent tonight in West Tyrone.
also, by the way, you're where the news is happening. So we're feeling like, as we always do and should, like we're basically in London, not paying enough attention to Northern Ireland. What happens? What does happen if you've got a Sinn Féin First Minister, and how is that going to change the relationship with London?
Yeah, well, funny, we had the canvassers at the door about 2 hours ago. Quite interestingly, and the Sinn Féin candidate very much. I mean, this is a deep green constituency. The Republic is 13 miles down the road. People here have their eye. I think the nationalist community, the nationalist stroke Republican community, have their eyes on the prize now of getting a Sinn Féin First Minister. It's nothing really more than a swapping of titles and in terms of the actual constitutional significance. But what it means politically is that it's going to make the case for a border poll very, very difficult for the London government to refuse. I think the nationalist community sense an opportunity now. There's a once in a lifetime opportunity that they sense now for a border poll. And as the candidate put it to me, Northern Ireland was created by a sectarian head count, and it's the only way it's going to be ended. So
just run us through that. Sorry, because I feel as though one of our former colleagues, Chris Cook, said that it's like one of the greatest failings of London-based newsrooms that they spend more time talking about Ohio than they do about Northern Ireland. Just so I understand it, so the logical follow-on is Sinn Féin wins.
So first.
And what's the timetable on a border poll? What would the time?
There isn't one. It lies within the gift of the Secretary of State, the London Secretary of State. So Brandon Lewis, when we say London, the Whitehall Secretary of State. So Brandon Lewis would have to determine. It's all set up in the 1998 Act, the Northern Ireland Act, which is the legislative embodiment, if you like, of the Good Friday Agreement. So under the provisions of the 1998 Act, then. All things being equal and the circumstances being right, what empirical evidence you would need, I don't know, but the most striking, I think, piece of empirical evidence Sinn Féin and the nationalist community at large would see it is that if they have the biggest number of seats in the Assembly and get the designation of the First Minister, then it will make the case for holding one almost impossible to refuse. And no doubt he will come under enormous pressure, and I can foresee litigation in the very short term if he doesn't sort of succumb. Although,
so you could have Michelle writing a letter saying we want a poll, Nicola writing a letter saying she wants it. I mean, before the end of this Parliament.
I don't see that being. I mean, depending on how resounding the victory or the result is, and I think they expect to be very well. I mean, the DUP is in an electoral free fall, and they expect it disastrously. I think the unionist vote is going to split three ways between the traditional hardliners and on the hard line of the DUP, the middle ground of the DUP, the Alliance Party, who sort of are a kind of a centrist, take a fairly neutral but slightly more pro-union approach. And then the Ulster Unionist Party, who expect to do they are currently led by a guy called Doug Beattie, who's got a military cross, a real man's man, and decorated soldier. Seems to be polling quite well. Probably will actually be or very peculiar transfer system, but probably get some votes from nationalists rather to further damage and weaken the DUP's standing. So. It'll be. I think everybody's thinking about everybody. Obviously, in London is looking at the council elections. But I mean, it's just as we said here on the morning after the referendum, and as you can see in all of this discussion about Ukraine and so on and so forth. I mean, it is just the old cliche about. I mean, I am in Tyrone for manna and Tyrone's, Churchill said after World War I. The dirty staples. We ain't going nowhere until you get rid of us. Unfortunately.
Mark, listen, thank you.
I mean, it's going to force itself onto the agenda quite soon.
Yeah, it's sort of one of those. It's so curious, isn't it, when you've got a news agenda like we have now, that you just the amount that you miss, and so it's it's brilliant listening to you about all of this, although it's also a really timely and painful reminder. I used to work before Tortoise at the BBC, and one of the things that was the most painful and nightmarish thing was trying to figure out how you did election time political debates in Northern Ireland, because as you just explained, how many different candidates and how they all got airtime. You know that was a heavily contested. Listen, I'm going to Paul, just go back to you just briefly. Is there anything that you're looking for that's going to happen in Parliament in the next week on Barker that we should watch out, or do you think people have got their attention elsewhere?
On Barker, yesterday, a former Lib Dem MP, Tom Brake, and Bill Browder filed a complaint with the Lords Commissioner for Standards. So the Lords Commissioner will now have to decide whether our report, in effect, because that's what the complaint is based on, presents enough evidence to start an inquiry into Barker's lobbying.
Right.
And we may know that within the week, maybe next week.
Right. Okay. Okay. Well, let's just keep an eye on that. Okay. Thank you. I don't know whether or not Emily, independent councillor, and is Emily Ben here? I'm trying to see if I can see Emily, because I think Emily, look at that. Are you out?
Hello,
representing your constituency in London. Where?
I've been listening. I've been walking and listening. Sorry, so forgive the al fresco.
So first, you need to tell everyone, Emily. You need to tell everyone before you get into this exactly what it is. Emily is sort of. Tell everyone about being an independent councillor, a City of London councillor.
I got elected to the City of London Council for a ward called Bread Street, which is just around St Paul's Cathedral. So if anyone knows anything about the City of London Corporation, it's a completely bizarre electoral process because no one lives in the City of London. I have in the ward that I'm now elected for as an independent, there are about 15,000 people that work there every day, and 6 residents.
So Emily, can I just ask you? No one, I've never asked anyone this, but can you tell us the names of your resident voters?
I can. I mean, I met one of them. It didn't take very long. I don't want to give their names away. One of them is called Mark. One of them is called Sharon. And one of them is called Cindy. They were very nice. They are all teachers at St Paul's Cathedral School, so it's not actually as representative of the area.
Right.
Hence why businesses vote. But it's a strange place. But it is the one thing I can say of anyone that's had any experience of local authorities, especially in the last 15 years, that have no money, the most exciting thing about it is the budgets, which are huge.
And Emily, can I ask you a question, which is, and fun enough, because when I heard that you'd been elected, I was very excited, and then I totally forgot to ask you, what was the process of thinking about independent versus Labour?
So, I mean, the City of London, traditionally you stand as independent because I'm asking business voters, so people who are representing their colleagues. It has worked traditionally on much more independent lines. And now as someone like me who has found partisan politics particularly difficult over the last 4 years from the Labour point, but I can imagine there are plenty of Conservatives who feel exactly the same on their side. Yeah. The chance to do politics not completely bound by what your party is saying it's attractive. It's very attractive. I don't know. I mean, it probably is going to be full of exactly the same sort of pressures and cliques and slates, just like normal politics. But I like many people I know, someone like me who found the Labour Party a little bit difficult, who found it particularly not a nice place to be. Forget even there were like political policy differences, but the culture of politics and the way it was done. And I am someone that, for example, got loads and loads of abuse, etc., on social media. I wasn't quite ready to dive back into it. And you forget for all the terrible, terrible behaviour, that some of which we've discussed this evening already, has been discussed. For lots of people that are just getting involved in it, like the human toll is it can be pretty rubbish.
Can I ask you, which is it's now that you're committed in London, it means you can't stand in Wakefield. I obviously don't know whether or not that's.
No,
But
no, but I mean, someone's going to.
Quick run. So I guess there are two elements of the Imran Khan case. One is,
Yes.
I mean, I'm not in a position to comment on the court case beyond noting the conviction, but there are two things that arise from it at the moment. One is, I'm slightly unclear on what happened with Crispin Blunt, the Tory MP who came out, in favour of Imran Khan, and I'm also slightly confused about whether there will or won't be a by-election there.
So for Crispin Blunt, I mean, it's almost unfathomable, bizarre what his approach was. He had listened to some of the trial, but only the bits when he was obviously the bits of the defence, as it were, not all of it. He's obviously a friend and clearly some sort of very close personal friend, but that statement, it's almost, it was so strange and so misjudged and so not really listening to the fact that this guy's been committed of really quite a serious crime. You can't really come back from that. He's managed to completely blow up his APPG that he's now going to have to not be chair of. It was, I've tried to learn about it more this afternoon as I thought it might come up, but I still don't quite understand what thought process that was going through your head. And this guy did loyalty to your friend, a complete misunderstanding of the judgment and the case. Just bizarre. And Crispin Blunt has been, increasingly outspoken on stuff, but in the last few years, it changed his kind of approach politically. But this is like a quantum shift of bizarre. And then I read. I think it must have been in the FT today that they had the Labour's lacking personality. Should they send for Ed Balls to be the candidate? I mean, if we have to wait for the sentencing of Imran Khan, if he's jailed for more than a year, then he's automatically out. If he isn't, but it's a serious sentence, then I'm sure that they will have enough signatures for a recall petition. To force it, so it'll be one of those two routes. So there'll definitely be a by-election, and 3,448 majority. That's if you're the Labour Party and you're 8 points ahead in your national polls as an average, that's a definition of a must-win constituency. So, but it's very, very strange. And I also don't know when they'd want to call the by-election, because that's the other thing that you've got to wait for the sentencing, I think, assuming that Imran Khan doesn't just resign of his own volition. But there's an interesting political question about when you want that by-election to be.
If you're the Tories, you mean?
If you're the Tory party,
Presumably you want it in the summer, in a time that no one's paying attention.
Exactly, no one's paying attention, and then we'll see.
Okay. Well, Emily, keep up the good fight for Cindy, Mark, and the other 15,000 non-resident members of your constituency. I'll see you tomorrow. Listen, thank you very much. I just wanted to check in one other thing before I just return to Think-ins, which is, I don't know whether James Wilson is happy to weigh in on the mysterious case of Lord Geit, Christopher Geit.
I am happy to weigh in.
Yeah, so in theory, he is the person who kind of marks ministerial homework on and probity. What's your judgment on what's happening with him?
Well, I mean, it's interesting. So Sunak obviously wrote to the Prime Minister over the weekend to say that he was referring himself to Geit, and that's probably an attempt to draw a line under the crisis that's currently engulfing him. His overriding concern was that the public retain confidence in the answer they're given, but according to a report this week in the Mail, allies of Sunak have also said that Geit allegedly knew about and approved the Chancellor's green card and his wife's non-dom status.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard because whatever the truth of it is probably helps take a step back and look at the bigger picture on this. The independent advisor on minister standards, the role that Geit is in, doesn't have a great record when it comes to this government. So his predecessor, Sir Alex Allen, resigned when his findings into Priti Patel's alleged bullying of civil servants were overruled by the PM. it kind of suggests that these investigations, the conclusions that they draw, are at best really a formality to be ignored, and at worst something that they can evade by denying them the whole truth, as Boris Johnson did when texts were revealed that he had asked the Tory donor Lord Brownlow for additional money for his flat refurb, which he had not disclosed to Guy. So I think, sorry,
I can't help feeling, James, this is where the story really is, isn't it? Is in Guy's kind of saddened relationship with the British establishment.
Yeah, I mean,
Buckingham Palace, and then through that whole Brownlow case.
Chris Brighton had said that his reputation, that Guy's reputation, had been tarnished by his whole involvement with Johnson, and is kind of dragging his whole position and the role it's meant to do and through the mud, really. I think that, going back to Brighton, something he said really interestingly a few months ago is that if Labour were to get into power, something they could really do would be to firm all this stuff up by putting the ministerial code into law and putting some meat on the bones when it comes to how to regulate ministers' behaviour. And I think, Geit, Sunak and Johnson are all really symptoms of that, a kind of a regulatory framework when it comes to ministers' behaviour that's just too loose and baggy and not firm enough.
James, thank you. I think that I think there's something in Christopher Guy, a story about that kind of character in British life that you don't necessarily see, but knows everything and sees everything, that might be worth pursuing. So we will come back to that. Before we're finished, I just want to run a small and probably failed or soon to be failed experiment, which is I just want to see if we can begin to trial. Is Mark St. Andrew there? Because is he lurking without his camera on? Is there a way of, hey Mark, is there a way of trying out some of our thinking ideas and then seeing whether people give them a thumbs up or thumbs down? Is there a kind of...
There is. So my glamorous assistant Liv behind the scenes has got a poll ready to go. So
okay, let's see how that works. Come on. Oh, okay. Oh my God, there's millions of choices. It was up there, but it's now disappeared. Hang on. Okay. So what do I do? Which thinking topic would you like us to explore? And can I choose any of them?
You should be able to choose any of them. There's 10 of them in total.
And Liv, but hang on a second. I see. But hang on. What do I do? I choose one.
Is it not letting you choose them all? Oh.
Not letting me choose anything.
Oh, Zoom has let me down.
Well, it's like a statement on democracy itself, isn't it? You feel so close.
Oh, you're seeing the poll results. Bear with me a second.
Oh, hang on. This is it. Just so you know, the way we're doing this is we've already got the results. Now we just need you to vote. Okay, here we go. Yeah. Which topic? What do you mean multiple choice, Liv? How many can I answer?
You should be able to just tap in the one that you would like to. There we go. It's starting.
Most. Yes. Just one. I can only do one.
Yes. So it should be the most popular one. But we'll be able to see.
Given that we've had a conversation. Oh, I see. This would do the most popular. Okay, I'm going to try that. All right. Okay.
And then we can see which our members like.
Yes. Do you see how seamless this is going? I think people are liking it. Look, Tess is actually laughing at the process. Okay, here we are. And do I sort of talk over the gap, Liv? Is that the idea?
Well, I can then stop it, and then we can see Elon Musk seems to be winning right now. So shall we, if we end the poll?
Yes, end the poll. And then what comes up?
And then I'm going to share the results with you.
Oh, that is good. People like all of them, it turns out.
Definitely drugs.
No one likes should the UK, or very few people like should the UK leave the Commonwealth. But okay, but there's nothing that no one wanted at all.
No.
That's it. And is that our whole poll? Is that the whole?
That's the whole poll. Yes.
Well, I think, is there a poll where we can all agree that went brilliantly?
I'll get that sorted.
Okay, with only one box, Liv. That's what I want. I want a thing that we can put up at the end of that. Did you think that went brilliantly? And you can only tick one box. That would be ideal. All right, listen, thank you very much, everyone. Just to let you know a few sort of practical things. So we are quite strong believers in when the world takes a breather, taking a breather. So tomorrow night, there's not a thinking over the Easter weekend. Happy Easter, people. Happy Passover. Happy lovers of a long weekend. We are taking some time to look and talk and think about other things. We're back on Tuesday night in the newsroom. Just to let you know, we have Jez Butterworth, who is the playwright, the author of Jerusalem, who's going to be in our newsroom coming to talk about, in fact, I had a very po-faced email that I'd sent James Wilson saying, have we really said this is the best play ever written? And I think it was a kind of slightly tongue-in-cheek joke, because I think people knew about Shakespeare and other things, but Jez is a very old friend and is a brilliant, an amazing writer and thinker, and quite wonderfully is not doing anything else talking about Jerusalem except coming to our newsroom to talk about it. So if you're interested in plays, the state of Britain, working with Mark Rylance, come along on Tuesday night. And then I'm going to get this wrong, Mark. Thursday is Will Young? Thursday. So Will Young, who amazingly has kind of brought that extraordinary voice of his to talking about mental health, calm, and a happier life, is also going to be in our newsroom to talk about these things. And so, you know, we'd really love to see everyone come in and be with us and hear from Jez and Will, but also really importantly, we'd love to hear from you. We're thinking about all those things deeply. And by the end of next week, if Mark, I, Steph, Liv, the whole gang of people have got our act together, we'll have the May-June thinking plans, and you'll be glad to know, if you're not in London, that we're getting back on the road in May, because the pandemic stopped us from doing those thinkings every other week out and about around the country, and we're heading back to do exactly that. So hope you have a very good evening. Thank you for sparing the time for joining us. Well done, Liv, and our poll. Have a great evening, everyone.